due to an unforeseen kind of sucky turn of events, I'm doing this in an old school method. So this video is kind of it's kind of about two different things. The first thing, obviously I'm using a webcam. I don't prefer to use a webcam, but this guy right here will not turn on. Battery, there's a fully charged battery. So we're gonna go ahead and drop this in. Now this is my Panasonic Lumix G7. This is what I would normally use to film. And so this LCD screen, when I turn this camera on, should come on. But as you see, there's nothing. Power light is on. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but there's a power light. It's on, but it's not doing anything. And even when I shut it off, that power light does not go off. I don't know what's going on here. This time it finally shut off. It's just not turning on. And so that is kind of the unfortunate situation that we are in. I wanted to do a video talking about my mom's computer that I finally finished. It's ready to go. It is operational. Everything is fully functional. And I was going to do that video, and that's why this other view is up, is so that you can get a look at it in a more kind of ghetto rigged manner that I would not normally prefer to do. But this is kind of what we are left in a position to do. And so, sorry, I keep looking because I'm looking at OBS to make sure that things aren't kind of wonky. I'll try not to do that anymore. So obviously that means that videos are going to be a little bit harder to produce for the time being, because I like using the G7. The video quality was pretty good. I was able to shoot in 4K. Luckily, I was able to do the live streams using it before it decided to do this. I don't know what's going on. I'm hoping tomorrow when I get home from work and I'm done fiddling around with stuff and I go to turn it on and it magically powers back up. But I don't have high hopes for it. I've cleaned the contacts on the battery, so it's not that kind of an issue. It worked yesterday because I was filming a little overview for my family that I'm going to leave on this computer. And today it just decided not to work. So you get this kind of an experience. I do want to talk about this build. I wanted to do some B-roll of it, and I wanted to show some of the different angles, but this is what you're going to get instead. Going to go ahead and flip the power switch. And so I'm using my other webcam, my Logitech C615, to kind of zoom in on this build. So hopefully it looks okay. It didn't want to do what I wanted it to do at first, but I think this is going to work out just fine. So obviously, this is the build for my mom's PC. This is for my family down in North Carolina. If you have not seen the parts video, I do go over each of the parts. I will put a card up in the corner for you to take a look at. If you missed the live stream, I did stream this build. I built this entire computer from start to finish on stream, installed Windows, and in another stream, I did some benchmarking and some stress tests, some overclocking. And so I will make sure to get those videos up. So if you're not subscribed, please do so. I will have those up. They're going to be long because the streams were long, but I'll try to cut them down a little bit, and I'll try to put timestamps in, to try and make it a little bit easier to watch. But for now, we're going to go ahead and fire this system up so that you can see it in all of its glory. So again, this is inside of a Fractal Design Meshify C. I really enjoyed building in what is basically a much smaller case than what I was building in the Phanteks Evolve and even the M.2 Evolve down here. Those are much bigger mid towers. This is a small mid tower. It does fit up to ATX, but it's a little bit more compact. And that was fine because they don't need a big giant system. They don't need something that is going to be massively just huge and taking up a ton of space. They just needed something that was going to work and was going to run and would take up a little less of a footprint than normal. But I did throw a little bit of flair into it. So again, if you didn't see the parts list, this is an AMD based build. It's my first AMD system after doing 2 Intel systems. And it's also my first air cooling system, which is quite a a contrast from the build behind it. That build is an 8700K with a custom water loop in it, graphics card cooled by water and everything. And then we've got a completely different direction we went with this in air cooling it. But again, Fractal Design, Meshify C, I wanted something that had good airflow, and I wanted something with the air cooler that was going to be much easier for them to maintain. I didn't want to have them spending a lot of time trying to diagnose an AIO that goes wrong. In fact, I still, to this day, get questions on the video that I did about the NZXT Kraken X62 not working for some reason that I eventually fixed. So that is a thing that happens, and I didn't want them to deal with it, so we went with this. Can never remember the name, so I'm looking at the box on the ground. Noctua NH-U12S SE-AM4. It's about $40 to $50 on Amazon, depending on when you buy it. It's the slimmed down version of their much bigger air cooler. The bigger one is a little bit wider and has two fans. This just has a single fan, but it works. It does exactly what it needs to do, and I will talk about the thermal performance here in a minute. I've gone ahead and put in the stock Fantex fans that were in the Evolve X into the front here. The stock configuration for this case is a 120 in the front and a 120 in the back. We now have two 140 millimeter fans in the front. We have the 120 in the back, and now the 120 that was in the front is up top. So we have two intakes, two exhausts, and they are all running at a really low RPM. They are not designed to really ramp up until this processor hits 70 degrees Celsius, and it doesn't. The air cooling in here is just really good. And of course, the ASUS Strix GTX 1060 has a decent air cooler. This isn't as beefy as the 1070, the 1080, or the 1080 Ti, but it's still pretty solid, and it will definitely ramp up if you don't get a good fan curve on it. I have a fan curve set for it, and we'll talk about the graphics card here in a moment as well. Building in this case was different because it being smaller, there's less room on the bottom openings for you to route cables. In this case, this motherboard is a little awkward because the USB 3.0 header is on the bottom. So you kind of have to, if I had any foresight, I would have routed the cable first, and then I could have just kind of bent it into the wire to get it into position. Instead, I don't know if you can really see, but it kind of just wraps around. It's one of the few cables you can see, along with there's a fan header down there, and there is an RGB header down there. So there is an LED strip. So there's a couple wires down there, and again, there's an awkward situation with this PCI Express cable because it kind of has to go through the side grommet because there's no grommet in the power supply shroud, and I didn't feel like removing that plate down there. But all in all, though, pretty easy to build in. The form factor doesn't really make much of a difference, but you do see how snug it is. You can see this graphics card is pretty much coming up to the edge of where the fans are. There's not a lot of space there. It would be really tough to get an AIO unless it had a really slim radiator into the front here. You could get one up into the top, though. There is some clearance, especially if it's a 240. That will sit closer to the front of the case as opposed to a 280. But radiator support, this isn't designed for radiators. This isn't designed for water cooling. This is designed for an air-cooled system, so that's what we did. This got the air going straight across and then up. All in all, though, first time working with AMD, didn't really have any issues. The BIOS is a little different than working with Intel because there's some different configurations that AMD puts into its processors. So the overclock on this isn't as elaborate as it is on my 8700K, but still we were able to get to 4.1 gigahertz. We are running that at 1.35 volts. I don't know if I just don't have as good a chip as you possibly could get, but I could not get 4.2 stable with any measure of voltage. 4.2 at 1.45. We weren't hitting temperature limits. We were hitting 70C, but it just would not survive a stress test. It couldn't do it. It would render out in it would run Cinebench. It could run a Cinebench render and it would do very well, but I could not get it to stay stable for more than maybe 15-20 minutes in a stress test. So back down to 4.1, and I had one crash with it on auto voltage, It was running the voltage at about 1.33. I put it back up to 1.35, ran another 2-hour stress test, ran another one after that, passed both of them without any issue. So it feels like it's pretty stable. I don't think they'll have too many issues. I actually left this up and running for about 3 days, kind of just not doing much of anything, but still, I just wanted to see if it would just kind of hard lock for no reason, because then I got to figure out what the problem is. There's something deeper going on. Some things that I did find interesting. This motherboard is the ASUS ROG Strix X470F gaming motherboard. Forum posts would have you believe it is the worst ASUS board that has ever been created, but I've seen it pretty much on any of the Strix boards, but I've not encountered any issues with it. The stability seems to be pretty solid. I've not seen anything unusual with temperatures, and something that I saw people point out were that you couldn't have multiple monitoring programs open. But I had Ryzen Master and Hardware Info 64 open. I opened up AI Suite. I never got any issue. There were never any conflicting issues. So I don't know how valid these complaints are, other than maybe there's something else that people are doing, or maybe these are complaints from 6 months ago when this board was pretty much launched, and those issues have since been squashed. I've not noticed anything quirky though about it. Memory is running at the 3200 megahertz speed that it is rated to run at. It is G Skill 16 gigabyte kit. It is a 2x8 kit, obviously, as you can see. And I kind of went with black and white because I just like how neutral it is. And it's the same thing we went with the cables. These are custom cables from Cable Mod. It is the Pro series of cables. Again, black and white, pretty neutral. I know the Noctua fan really stands out, and there are going to be people who sit there and go, oh my gosh, you use the ugly Noctua fans, but I didn't really care too much about that. My family's not going to care about that. They just want this thing to stay cool, and it does just that. Typically idles anywhere from about 28 to 35 C, just kind of fluctuates a little bit, but doesn't go above that typically. And at full load, it will peak at about 62, 63, but generally stays about 58 to 59. Didn't notice anything extraordinary when I played some games. I played a couple of games of Minecraft. Obviously, Minecraft doesn't tax your graphics card too much, is more CPU bound, but never heard the fans kick in, never noticed anything funny with temperatures. And played a match of Fortnite, and again, same thing, no hitches, no issues. 1080p gaming is pretty much where the 1060 is aimed at, and I was able to get, around 100 FPS with a couple of tweaks. You could play this on epic settings, but you're going to be right about that 60 to 65 FPS with this Ryzen 2600. Turned a couple of them to high, turned some post-processing down a little bit, and we were much higher. We were closer to 90 FPS, 100 FPS. They're not going to be worried about that. This monitor, you can't see it. Well, you can kind of see it. This is it right here. This is an ASUS monitor. It's a 1080p monitor, VP247. It's just a 75 hertz FreeSync. FreeSync doesn't really matter because this is an NVIDIA card, but they could still get the refresh rate, and they will be able to enjoy that. So really, they could just put VSync on if they wanted to and get 75 FPS in any game that they play. And they don't play a lot of intensive games, so I'm not really worried about how their frame rate is going to be. I think this is going to suit them pretty well. Overclocking, like I said, wasn't that difficult. Got it to 4.1 gigahertz, and the difference in performance was pretty good. But again, clock speed, it's not an 8700K, which I have at 5 gigahertz. So the Cinebench scores between the 8700K and the 2600 are noticeable, but for what it is going to be used for, the 2600 is a phenomenal value at around $150 to $160. You can get a little bit of an overclock. I might be able to get a couple of the cores up to 4.2. Again, I think it's just a chip that doesn't have that much frequency range. I know that some people can get 4.2, some people can even get 4.3 on the Ryzen 2000 series processors. 4.1 is where we capped out. I'm happy with that. They're going to be happy with it. I have a little bit of a fan profile set up for them, and they should be able to enjoy this with not a whole lot of noise. This is a very silent system for the most part. It'll sit on the desk next to them, and they won't really notice it unless they're doing some real crazy rendering. My niece wants to do some more intensive graphical work, So now she'll have the ability, because she's using a really bad computer right now, she'll have the ability to use more intensive programs if they see fit, and it won't have any issue with anything whatsoever. However, I did make a little video for them, so if they do run into any issues with the overclock, there is a stock profile. Obviously, you could just reset to optimize defaults, but I walked them through how to take it back down to stock by just changing the profile that I set up for them. All in all, again, pretty easy time building in this case. I didn't run into any issues during the build process. It's snug, but everything fits. And ultimately, it's a very good case to work in. The front panel is finicky. I know people have seen enough about the fractal design cases to understand that this thing is really on good, as well as the mesh front, but it is not all that difficult to pop it off. I like the front dust filter that pops out like this and just goes all the way across. I wish more companies did that, because getting to the back is not always something that you can do. However, these Corsair power supplies, they don't rev until they're at load. I've never had dust in either of these systems that I have running full time here, and those are both RMX systems. This is an RMX power supply as well. The only hiccup that I've encountered with this build, and I've double checked this USB 3 header and the cable multiple times, the USB header to the closest to the power button does not work. The one next to it works fine, but the one closest doesn't. I don't know what the issue is. I checked the connections underneath the panel. They seem to be fine. There's no bent pins on the header. The header is securely on. It is on as far as it will go. I just may have a dud header. I don't really know. It's not worth ripping the system apart and trying to get a replacement case at this point in time. I don't think they're going to care too much. I certainly don't have too much of a problem with it. It's something that I can work around. I know they'll be able to work around with it. I know a lot of you out there will be like, no, you send that thing back and you get a new one. The system's already built. It's done. I don't feel like ripping it apart and waiting 3 to 4 days or however long it takes for them to send me a new one, and then possibly have the same issue, because I've seen a number of posts about this. Just seems to be something that happens. The other one works. The other one, the ones on the IO shield work. So that's really all that matters. Pretty happy with the build. Again, keep an eye on the channel for the stream video to go live, as well as the testing video. If you're interested in that sort of thing, there's not really anything exciting. It's just me running Heaven and Valley until I get the graphics card at a stable overclock. This is at plus 120 on the core, on the boost clock, plus 1,000 on the memory. No issues whatsoever. Runs pretty flawlessly. Again, no real hiccups with anything that I could find. Everything is working as it's supposed to. The M.2 NVMe drive has not been an issue. Both drives are detected and are functioning. We have a 500 gig Evo, Samsung 850 Evo. We have a 2 terabyte hard drive in the back. Can't really complain. So that's kind of the summary of this build. If you saw the parts list and were wondering how it turned out, this is the final product. I think it looks pretty good. I think it functions very well. It's running without any kind of issues, and I can't wait to send this to them. We are going to be sending this out to them on Saturday, the 15th of December. And I'm hoping that it gets to them within about a week's time. Probably going to ship at FedEx, but that could change. I do have a lot of stuff to package up for them, because we have this here. This is the Logitech 203 gaming mouse. And then we have, this is going to be a little harder to see, but this is a Logitech G213 Prodigy keyboard. Not a mechanical keyboard, just a memory keyboard, but I'm throwing that in as well. So they are getting a full build. Tower, monitor, mouse, keyboard, as well as my HyperX Cloud 2 headset that I don't use. Going to give them that as well. So they have everything they need to get started with a brand new computer to do graphical work, to play games on, to do whatever they end up doing with it. Probably browse the internet, knowing my mom, and have everything pretty much new, and everything checks out. The keyboard, everything is checked out with the keyboard. The mouse works, and I've got the basic pieces of software I want them to have installed, including the monitoring software that I've told them not to touch. So that is the build for the family inside of the Fractal Design Meshify C. I like what Fractal Design has done here. Wish the other USB port worked, but ultimately that's a minor issue. Did not encounter anything else during the course of building this. Everything kind of just came together. There's enough room in the back for cable management. I didn't do a tip-top job, but I did bundle cables as best I could, and I really like the aesthetic of this build. Again, we have a Phantix digital RGB strip up top to provide some overglow, and obviously the motherboard and graphics card have their own RGB lighting as well. I think it looks pretty good. I like the way it's performed. I'm pretty happy with it. I think they will be too. If you have any questions about this build, if you have anything that what would you have done differently with this build? Let me know. Let's talk about it in the comments below. For now though, I don't know how many videos I'm going to be doing going forward. I really wanted to do a video on the 8700K build, but ultimately I don't know if that's going to happen now because the camera that I would like to use to do that is not functioning. We could do it the same way. I just don't know if I want to. Maybe I will. Maybe it's worth a look. Thanks for watching though. I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you're subscribed for more if you found this to be interesting. And if you didn't, don't just tell me I talk too much. I know I talk too much. It's 20 minutes of me talking right now. In the meantime though, I will see you guys in the next one.